All right, so this is me covering chapter 3 of Byung-chul Han's In the Swarm Digital Prospects. I'm going to try and do this one on my own and read through the chapter with the highlights that I made and just try and comment on it. So we'll get started. The chapter is called Demediatization. And just to pull up demediatization, I should have had that ready before. Um, Demediatization. Demonization. That's what comes up first. Anyway, I understand demediatization is to take out the mediator between something. So to remove that middle party. The digital medium is a medium presence. Its temporality is the immediate present. Digital communication is distinguished by the fact that information is produced, transmitted, and received without intermediaries. More and more interfaces are being eliminated. Mediation and representation are viewed as a lack of transparency and inefficiency as temporal and informational congestion. So, um, yeah, more and more things are becoming flat. The hierarchy, like he says earlier in chapters, is being removed. So the ability to um, have any space is gone. So it's all there. It's all present. Um, then it goes to radio, a classic mass medium that works electronically, admits only unilateral communication. Its amphitheatrical structure blocks interaction, right? So you sit, it's passive in a sense that you're sitting there with, maybe your family way back in the day in like the 50s and I'm sure earlier. And you're just taking in the information. It goes on to say its radioactive emissions have no back radiation, as it were. I think about that too now, like where there's the radiation that we receive from our cell phones and like laptops is non-ionizing radiation. So you should look into that. That's kind of interesting to do the research and like all of that change that's been coming about where like, oh, you shouldn't keep the phone in your front pocket. If you're gonna keep it on your person, maybe put it in your back pocket or don't wear it. Lots of people now, they only want to sleep in the same room as their phone. So I think that's interesting. He used radioactive. Those who receive its message are condemned to passivity. In contrast, the internet demonstrates a wholly different topology. It is unlike the amphitheater, which has a center of emission representing an institution of power, right? So it's this one consolidated place, and it's just pouring right out and radiating it, like it's saying. Today, we are no longer just receivers and consumers of information. We generate and broadcast it, right? So that's like everything now. Everyone has a take on something. Everyone is kind of forced to put themselves out there if they want to be a part of whatever this digital world is. No longer no longer content to consume information passively, we wish to produce and communicate it ourselves actively. So even that, like, there's no longer a moment to breathe and like have reflection. It's like, no, I have to be on, engage, and put back in real time, which is an active pursuit. There's no like and passivity is nice. We need that at times. We are consumers and producers in one. This double role is increasing the quantity of information on an enormous scale. Yeah. So it's like, because I think they say like on YouTube, it's like, I'm yelling right now, but I think on YouTube, they're like every day there's like billions of hours of content being produced. Let me look it up really quick. Uh, oh, never mind. This is, I should have had that prepared. Anyway, um, this next green highlight that I have is really nice. The digital medium does not simply provide windows for passive watching. It also offers doors through which we relay the information that we generate. Windows on a computer are windows with doors. They communicate with other windows without intermediary spaces or authorities. Like that's a cool idea. Like that now the window is something through which we peer others and we can get information and the door is something different where that blocks. It allows us to we can peer through doors, but it also can block us and keep us insulated, protected. But now that window acts as a door in which there's a sense like you're kind of exposed too, like you can't draw your curtains. So, um, but it's a doorway, and now we have windows, computers, all this the digital windows that we open up. Windows with doors. They communicate with other windows without intermediary spaces or authorities, right? So it's just like everyone can access. Digital windows open not onto a public space, but onto other windows, right? So you could be peering across into some other person's reality or life, and it might be intimate. And I mean, it is intimate, right? We're looking at lots of intimate moments between people that I don't know if we should be. This sets digital media apart from mass media such as radio or television. In fact, media such as blogs, Twitter, and Facebook demediate communication. Today's society of opinion and information is based on such demedialized communication. Everyone is producing and transmitting information. And even that idea, like it's like that's overwhelming. And there's just so much content. Like, can you even really be present with all of that coming in, all the information coming in, and then also you're like compelled to almost to put out your own information because that's how we are showing that we are here and being seen, I guess. Everyone is producing transmission and transmitting information. Because of the demedialization of communication, journalists, elite opinion makers, indeed the erstwhile priests of opinion, now seem increasingly anachronistic and superfluous, right? So it's like, yeah, what do we need these journalists for when it's all out there? You just have to look it up on whatever um, aggregate news site or digital like video site. It's all there. So like we don't need people that might have been spending their whole life cultivating a critical eye for sifting through information and applying rigorous ways of dissecting bullshit, right? Now it's like, no, everyone gets to look at and some people don't have enough education in dissecting the bullshit that they might win over the populace with their charisma and guide people in a direction where it's like, oh, this person is a schmuck, and like we're listening to them. So, but they captivate me, and so I take their opinion as something that is bona fide and of like substance, where maybe they've only been doing journalistic inquiry for a couple months, but someone told them they were a good speaker and they went to theater class or whatever. Now seeming, yeah, anachronistic, superfluous. The digital medium is in the course of abolishing all priestly classes, right? So nothing's sacred anymore. Nothing is, yeah, sacred. General demedialization is putting an end to the era of representation. Instead, everyone wants to be present personally and directly, to present his or her opinion without a middleman. Representation is giving way to presence or co-presentation. And I have to think more about this, but there's no one to be. It's an end of an era of representation, so no one is no longer speaking on behalf of a large group of people or some people. Everyone now is, I'm here and I'm giving out my ideas and receiving and actively here right now. But there's that ever presence and we are co-presenting. So I mean, I'm just thinking this out on my own. This is the part of this, me reading this book is so I can actually understand the information and I'm holding myself accountable of like actually reading and trying to learn post bachelor's, which I think most people should have a lifelong of continuing education in multiple domains and intelligences. The mounting pressure for demedialization is affecting politics too. This spells trouble for representative democracy. Political representatives no longer serve as transmitters so much as they count as barriers. It's like, yeah, get out of the way because I can represent myself, I can speak for myself, and, like, what do I need you for? Um, Accordingly, the pressure for demediatization finds expression as the call for more participation and transparency. Yeah, yeah. Right, like, now, because we can all see, we can all look through these windows, we don't need doors anymore, and if I need to see and be in someone else, I'll climb through that window, as inconvenient as that might be. Germany's Pirate Party owed its initial success to this development. The mounting compulsion for presence that the digital medium generates is threatening the very principle of representation in general. Again, it's like, I need to be here because that's how the conversation's going about, and I don't need you to represent me because the the barrier to entry is so easy now that I can actually walk through and speak for myself, which there's something beneficial to having that. Often representation serves as a filter. This has altogether salutary effects. By operating selectively, it enables the exclusive. So salutary, I remember meaning it's like beneficial without like thinking it would be beneficial. Um, anyway, because sometimes you need someone to represent you to help filter and like create a more, yeah, a more refined idea or uh, point for you. For instance, when publishers offer discerning titles, they promote cultural and intellectual refinement. They cultivate language. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the, and we need that. We need people to really mull over ideas and what's currently happening and apply it to the past and see how that language might be reflect something in the past. And then also, how do we think about creating a new future through that language? Journalists may even risk their lives to conduct a thorough investigation and produce a qualified report. Yeah, I'm not too, I'm kind of uneducated in journalistic pursuits, but I do think that if you want some like high quality journalism, sometimes that requires people being in very precarious situations to have the real deal experience. This one guy, Les Luthor, has a lot of interesting on Twitter, has a lot of interesting takes on like what's happening in the world in real time. And we'll go to these places and present a different perspective on like what's actually happening. It's LEZ and then Luthor, like Lex Luthor, but Les Luthor. Um, in contrast, demediatization entails massification in many domains. Language and culture flatten out and become vulgar. In an interview, the best-selling author Bella Andre observes that she has no trouble cranking out books, nor does she need to convince an agent first. I can write that exact book my readers want. I can write the exact book my readers want. I am my readership. Yeah, like so in a way it's like the narcissism is just growing because it's like, no, I can just speak in my own mind and that's good enough and it's crude. You can't just be thinking straight. Like the thoughts are in your head and then you just spit them out. Like that's a very crude way of living. You need to have time to be in your thoughts, shut your mouth, and then maybe workshop some of the ideas that you have with other people that are confidants, and then have something of more substance. Like this chapter is like kind of garbage for me because I'm not having the chance to, maybe this is what this is also because I'm just speaking into the camera and people are going to watch it later if they do, but also I'm in real time talking out what understand how I'm understanding these ideas. And we need that. We don't need to be vulgar all the time. Um, but I am my votership heralds the end of but but I am my votership heralds the end of the politician in the strong sense. That is, politicians who insist on a standpoint and, instead of walking in the line with constituents, walk ahead of them with a vision. The future as the time of the political is disappearing. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you need a spearhead. I mean, we quite often we need spearheads. As strategic action, politics demands power of information. sovereignty over its production and distribution accordingly. Yeah. So sometimes that's how I interpret that, is like sometimes you need to hoard information in order to get the jump on other people's ability to have a take on something, which I mean, for one thing, I think that, I guess there's a place for it, but also the information hoarding seems to have been going on for so long that like a lot of just normal people are getting screwed out of like having all the details and really understanding what's going on and speaking for themselves or speaking to their actual representative. Um, Accordingly, it cannot do without closed spaces where information is held back on purpose. The political, in other words, strategic communication calls for confidentiality. Yeah, sometimes just shut your mouth and think it over, talk between people, let some of the very vulgar ideas come out between the few people. And it's not like those are like deep seated vulgar thoughts that you like harbor later on. But like in the process of making things, there's gonna be coal. There's gonna be what the thing when they melt metal, slag. There's gonna be like some nastiness that is the byproduct of whatever interaction and ideas that we are trying to process as people. And there's a push to kind of make everything out in the open so that you can't really have a high quality thought or position on things, because the slag is seen as like the only component of the idea being worked on. And sometimes like confidentiality between a few people working something out is like really, it's critical. And it doesn't, yeah, like I said, all right. So if everything is made public at once, politics necessarily grows short of breath and becomes short term. Issues thin out into idle talk. Total transparency imposes the temporality on political communication that makes slow, long term planning impossible. Which, as humans, we need that for probably many hundreds of years. We're like, we haven't evolved to, as like at this stage, to have these fast paced communications of really significant ideas um, be a thing yet. I'm thinking about Twitter now, and I think it comes up in a second about like what Twitter is. He doesn't speak specifically, but it becomes impossible to let things ripen. The future is not the future is not the temporality of transparency. Transparency is ruled by presence and the present tense. Under the dictate of transparency, dissonant opinions or unusual ideas are not voiced in the first place. Because yeah, like if the windows will like sometimes you want to change, or you have to be naked, and as you bend over, you don't want people to be looking at your body in this like awkward position. So you don't want transparency, and that's like the same way for thinking about ideas and building up a position on something. Sometimes it's you're in a vulnerable place and you can't really even, you're not even going to get changed then, because you're like, this person's going to catch me um hunched over or trying to put my underwear on, and then I have no more power because I've been vulnerable. But it's like we all have to get dressed, we all have to wash our bodies. Hardly anything is ventured, right? You're like, fuck it, I'm just gonna stay in bed and just be on the computer the whole time. The imperative of transparency produces a strong compulsion to conform. So it's either that or we're all just, yeah, anyway. Like constant video surveillance, it gives rise to the feeling of being watched. Therein lies its panoptic effect. Ultimately, it comes to a Gleichschaltung, that's my one attempt of communication. The repetition of the same. Quote, constant media observation has made it impossible for us politicians ever to discuss provocative or unpopular topics and positions openly in a confidential setting. You always have to count on somebody passing it on to the press. And yeah, I mean, I already spoke about that. The author, Dirk von Gelin, author of new version, but claims to be making writing itself transparent. Excuse me. Yet what Yeah, what would wholly transparent writing really mean? That's what I was thinking. When I read this, I was like, this is Twitter in a sense. And I'm not even on Twitter, but I'm thinking like Twitter is very open to anyone seeing it unless like I think there's a I'm like I said, I'm not on it, but too much, but there's a way that you can kind of lock yourself in and only people that follow you can see what you're putting out there. But even then, you can screen cap that and then share it. So it's like that. It is Twitter. Now that I think of it, Twitter is like is completely transparent. For Peter Han, writing is a lonesome expedition, and I remember I was going to talk about this with Yurt, but um, yeah, it sets out for the unknown where no one has gone before. In this, it's like taking action or thinking in the strong sense of the word. Thought for Heidegger means setting out alone, off the beaten track. Yeah, and I mean, right, like, sometimes we need I keep saying that. We have to be out by ourselves to truly test who we are, to learn deeper about ourselves, and not be a part of the swarm. And some of the best experiences I've had is, like, when I lost my mind and took my bicycle from the Bronx to Fort Lauderdale and over, like, 6 weeks and just biked every day and was by myself and just being in that sense, like, the American dream of, like, going across the country, but I didn't. I just went south. And being alone is critical. We need more time alone, but not isolated. And I should think about that more. Like, what does that mean? Being alone is one thing, but isolated is like, yeah, I don't want to talk too much about that right now. The beat of the wing of arrows touches him every time he takes a substantial step and ventures onto untrodden paths. In fact, we call the call to make writing transparent amounts to abolishing it. Writing is an exclusive activity. In contrast, collective and transparent writing is merely additive. And I guess to Twitter, that's you put your idea out and then someone else is going to repost it or whatever, retweet it or whatever it is. And it's constantly just adding on to. But I would imagine there have to be some people that are putting out the initial new idea on Twitter. So there are people who, and I think are gatekeepers or have more of a push to direct the swarm. It has no capacity for to bring forth the wholly other, the singular. Transparent writing simply brings information together. The way of the digital is addition. The demand for transparency is reaching far beyond a call for participation or freedom of information. It heralds a paradigm shift. The demand for transparency represents a normative claim insofar as it declares what is and has to be. It defines being in a new manner. Yeah, I don't even know what this really means. It it means that you have to share everything. That's like the one idea that I keep going over. Like over socialize, share everything, and if you don't share like even your health information with people, then um you don't exist, or we don't want you part of a part of like what we're doing, or you're not allowed here. You must share everything. That way we know what's going on, who you are. And I mean, whatever happened to like reading between the lines, subtext, body language? Like we don't need to share everything, but we're being told that being here in this reality requires that. And I guess that's how I think of it right now. It defines being in a new manner. In an interview, Michael Butor recently remarked that literature is facing an intellectual crisis. And shit, man, I think that's like one of the reasons why intuitively I was like, I need to start reading and actually uh, analyzing books. And this is my first step to, make that more of a practice. Because if I'm struggling, and not that I'm a big voracious reader, but I'm actively trying to make a push to read more. And I wonder how many people are conscientious about that. We're not just living in an economic crisis, right? We're fucked, man. Like so many things are fucked. But I think in that rubble, there's a lot of opportunity to do stuff. So it's it's a crisis for sure, and we're fucked. But we also have like there's an opportunity. You just have to see what the new formation is, and how can you take some of the materials and make your own thing. We're also living in a literary crisis. I think even like when they're like great authors, it always like Mark Twain or Jules Verne, or I mean, and like I can't even really recite. I think the only guy who I think of is Haruki Murakami, and that's who I learned when read a little bit of when I was in high school, and then I kind of stopped reading literature. What what we're now experiencing in Europe is a crisis of the spirit. That's so true. Yes, a lot of people have lost their spirit, lost their creative spirit. When asked how to recognize the crisis, he replied, "For the last 10 or 20 years, almost nothing has been happening in literature." Right? That's the same idea the guy says, stalled century, all like culture is kind of just regurgitated. We're chasing nostalgia, and in a way, chasing that nostalgia is going to be something for the younger generation that they don't even have like an anchor point in like a digital media or songs, or it's all just going to be a repeat of a repeat. So then even what they grew up with is going to have no real texture to it. There's a tide of publications but an intellectual standstill. The reason is a crisis of communication. Right? Isn't that so interesting? Like, we have all these tools to talk to each other and to communicate digitally, but the real-time 3D ability to communicate with each other is um, very poor. And you're either like not talking enough, or you talk too much, um, or the conversation doesn't really go anywhere further beyond like the same points that you always travel with certain people. So having a good conversation is, I think, something that's going to be even more valued as time goes on, or even just being able to listen to somebody. Um, the new means of communication are remarkable, but they cause tremendous noise. Totally. The medium of thinking is quiet. Clearly, digital communication is destroying quiet and calm. Addition, which generates communicative noise, does not follow the way of the spirit. Yeah, I think sometimes the spirit needs to rage and let its energy expel out into the world and contribute to the world. But then there's also a time of like reflection, contemplation, and those are quiet moments when I think of it. And I think right now, us being ever present online digitally is that expelling of our spirit. We're losing our spirit. We're being loosed, right? That's what some people say. Um, and so there's no way for the spirit to regenerate and to take a second and, really interpret all this information. It's incredible. Like, our brains are probably so different, from 50 years ago. Like, just how much electricity and all this stuff that we're swimming in, and then all the actual ideas that are being presented to us, all the subliminal imagery, all these things. Like, I've said it before, but like, how much of what I'm really thinking is me thinking, or was planted by PepsiCo or these think tanks. So we could definitely use more quiet time and more reflection and being 3D, right? That's the digital off ramp. That's like what this is right now. I'm only in part. A part of this is, like I've said before, I hope to meet people in 3D that maybe they have a shorthand. They experience what I'm saying online. It resonates with somebody, and then in 3D, I work with whomever it is, and we do physical training together. And there's a next step in communication, because there's like so many awesome, creative, kooky ideas that we all want to share with each other, but we're just so stunted right now. And the past couple of years has definitely like fucked our brains and our ability to like just basically relate. Oh, I'm thinking about sometimes when I'm with my daughter, I'm trying to teach her how to play and engage with other kids. And some of these kids are much older than her. And I realize that they should be the ones that are kind of guiding the whole interaction. But because they're like been the past 3 years in this kind of lockdown position with the mask, and then there's the after effects of that with their families and the general society as a whole, that now I'm having to really be a part, and you should be a part of like how your child learns how to engage and interact with people, but even just to talk about like, how do we play if we've never learned, it's kind of scary now that I think about it. It's like it should be innate within these children, and I think some kids it does, but it's also like you learn based off of like who you see around you and how do your parents play with each other and interact with their families, and a lot of these kids I think they're not even really experiencing that, which is terrifying because it's almost like moving slow motion, and then I have to help my daughter understand that like they're moving in slow motion, and you can help them move faster, and you can get to more complex play. That's what this all is. It's like, can we have more complexity in our interactions? And right now we're so like expelled out that we can't even um collect ourselves, right? These windows are all around us, and that overseeing eye is like crushing us in a way, and we have to kind of create this barrier, this structure that lets us have a moment to be in solace, be with other people that can appreciate that, and have a quieter moment where those ideas are bouncing around and there isn't the cacophony of everything happening all at once. So with that, I hope to have people work with me in the following chapters, and I'm going to reach back out to some of those people, and hopefully they agree to, bounce back and forth with these ideas in like chapter 4 or 5, whatever. And ideally it would be cool to have like a panel where there's a couple people that have read some of the book, and then we talk about a single chapter, or we talk about some ideas that have come up in the previous recordings. So this is me trying to create more complex play for myself, because I can feel my spirit like speaking for me. It's very important that I start to have more play and more interactions that are meaningful. I mean, that's like a part of what this is, right? Like what are we here for? It's crazy. I can come here just to like get my dick stomped in. I'm so over it. Like we need to, start training harder, start interacting and playing harder, and like have meaningful interactions where we help uplift each other, All right. So beta today, better tomorrow, and peace.